tonight I put together a lecture which is a little different than lectures that I give, because I sort of mixed things up a bit. Instead of going completely chronologically, I've added in some recent paintings next to early paintings, for nothing else, to amuse myself, because the lecture, I don't know, I just thought it needed a little spicing up. So I hope that it's not too confusing, the way that I've done it. We're going to find out. This is the first painting that I'm showing. Well, first I just want to say something about the introduction that was just made, which is that I actually have not had numerous teaching. I mean, I have taught in many different places, but I've never had a regular tenured teaching position, and that is because when I was looking for a teaching job and needed a teaching job, they weren't hiring women in art departments. So that's just so you know why I never had a tenured teaching position. It wasn't for the lack of trying or wanting one. Anyway. This is an early landscape done in 1964. And the reason I'm showing it is because I'm going to be showing work that progresses from this point. And just so you know, I'll refer back to it from time to time. But I thought I should show it. And then I'm going to jump to something that's completely different, which is called The Death Scene. And this painting was inspired by my having seen Max Beckmann's a painting called The Death Scene at the Museum of Modern Art when I was a very, very young painter. And I think that painting probably moved me more than any painting I had seen before that. And it just happened around the time that my grandmother had died, and I made this painting called The Death Scene. These are just some very early paintings that I'm showing you. This is called The Lovers. And the other thing I've done with this lecture is that for anyone who has seen lectures of mine before this, I'm frequently not showing the usual suspects. I mean, I specifically went into my files and tried to find paintings that I haven't shown at lectures. I mean, there'll be a few that'll be familiar, but some of them will be really pulled out from under. This is Portrait of Emily, which I did in graduate school when I went to graduate school at Rutgers University, and got my MFA. As an undergraduate, I was a sociology major, and I only started painting as a senior in college, and went in non-matriculated for a year, and then took 2 years to get my MFA. We had a critic come to school, and I remember this particular critic looked at this painting and said, "You can't put an expressionist head on a Matisse body." And I said, "Well, I did. I mean, you know." I thought that was amusing. But as you'll see, some of the things that are in this painting I carry on into other work. This is called altar painting, and I've made many altar paintings since. Well, actually, this one's called Hold Me, and an altar painting is coming up. This painting was about some obsessive thing that I had about an older teacher of mine. This is an altar painting. Using wallpaper and this This is called Bride Landscape. I was not the bride for this painting. This was long before I got married. But there's a painting that follows it that's it was done last year. And for some reason I saw kind of a similarity between these two paintings and decided to juxtapose them. This is called Break in Two, My Heart So Needy. And I play the recorder, and I found this piece of Bach recorder music called exactly that, Break in Two, My Heart So Needy. And actually it was painted at a time when there was a major drama going on in our family, and it was really very difficult. And that's where this painting came from. So that's a new painting. Going back to the old paintings, as you see, this is getting a little surreal. I'm making a room landscape inside a room with a breast, which is in a box. The barns are outside the window. So it's more sculptural than anything I had done before, I think. This is also a brand new one called In Bloom. It looks a little strange. I think it needed to be stretched a little bit to the right, but back to the early work. Again, this surreal idea of a room and a box and anthropomorphic figures coming out of the box. Sort of, you can see, or at least I can see, kind of feminine, female body parts. I'm trying to think of when this was done. It had to be like 1965 or something like that, 66. This was the beginning of the stroke paintings, I would say. And this also was in about 1968, where I'm still having these sculptural kind of figures in the painting, as you can see on the upper right, but it's a landscape. The strokes are broken apart. I remember specifically doing this painting when I came back from Belgium, having visited my sister and spent some time there. And I kind of had a mini nervous breakdown over there. I mean, I suppose it was a major anxiety attack, if we want to not call it a nervous breakdown. I mean, I can look back on it and say it was a major anxiety attack. But when I came back, I knew that I wanted to go back to the feeling of the landscape paintings, but I didn't want to make the landscape paintings anymore. And I knew that I felt kind of broken apart. I mean, that's how I was feeling. And that's where this painting came from, where I was breaking apart the strokes, or and trying to, whoops. And this followed it. It's a very small painting, pink sky with the same kind of strokes in a landscape. Unfortunately, it's out of focus and it's not in very good shape, but the slide. But the important thing for me with this painting was that I was actually painting paint strokes. I mean, I remember making these strokes and spraying them with spray enamel. But the other important thing was that I was breaking out of this rectangular space that I was in. And just those little, believe it or not, I have a pointer with me. very prepared. These little edges where I broke out of this square or this rectangle were for me the main event of the painting. It was such a big deal that I did that. And this is all wallpaper. This is an early painting using flocking, and there's kind of a grid right here. I was beginning to use the grid, and this is the flocking, and there's more flocking. But it is a female figure, and it was done in around 1968. A newer painting called The Heart is a Lake, which I thought looked kind of nice with this one. This was done about maybe 4 years ago. It says on it, the heart is a lake, the heart is a fistful of earth. And it comes from, God, I'm not going to remember the book. Who's the poet that wrote the novel about another poet, and it was about took place in Germany. I can't think of it, but it was one of the best novels. And if I think of it, I'll tell you. But she, in that book, she said the heart is a lake, the heart is a fistful of earth, and that's where this painting came from. This is an early painting from 1968 called Big Blue. And as you can see, it has this leopard skin that I put on the portrait of Emily on the side of this painting, and all this flocking. And once again, I'm painting paint strokes, but I'm still staying safely within a landscape space. This is the breakthrough painting called Lines and Strokes, where it's painted on an unprimed canvas with a grid. I was really struggling to make the painting be a narrative and be something like music, where you can read the painting from top to bottom or left to right. And once again, I'm painting paint strokes. But for me, this painting was the major breakthrough clarity moment that I was looking for many years. That's a tiny painting, also a stroke painting with a grid. This is called Symphony, and here I am doing a lot of experimentation with the strokes and with the grid and with how everything's, how the drips are falling after I make the stroke. I've made 6 symphonies, and I think I've included all of them in this lecture. The other reason I've put in some paintings that I think that no one in New York might have seen is because I've shown a lot in Boston. And what I realized is that some of my very best paintings have been shown in Boston and sold and never even seen in New York. So that's another reason why I included certain paintings in this lecture. This is called Birth. And I don't know why I called it Birth, because it was long before I gave birth. This was probably painted in 1971, and I didn't give birth until 1979. Another small stroke painting. Also a stroke painting, but on the bottom is written, "A letter to my female friends." And this might have been the beginning of thinking about all that. And it certainly was the beginnings of the women's art movement were going on in 1970, in the early 70s. Another very tiny stroke grid painting. Red squares. And what was happening with the stroke paintings is they were becoming too easy for me. And they would it's not that I didn't think about them for a long time, each one, but they would happen within about 2 days or 3 days. And I wanted to make a painting that would last, where I would go in the studio and I would work on it for maybe a month instead of a few days. So I began making paintings where I was filling in the squares as opposed to doing the strokes on the squares. This is Symphony No. This is a painting no one has ever seen, almost including myself. But I found this slide called Scattered, but I actually really like it. It's crazy. This is by not the thinking person's expressionist, as Jed Pearl called me. The Storm, where I was made a stroke paint. I had become well known in the early 70s, and actually it became very difficult. I began collecting people like butterflies. I didn't really know who was my friend, who wasn't my friend, I was young. It was very, very confusing. Larry and I I was married to Larry Fink for years. We moved to a farm in Pennsylvania, and it was very muddy. And anyway, I made a stroke painting, and in order to feel less vulnerable, I covered up every beautiful part of the painting I could with kind of a dark mud color. I think it ended up to be beautiful anyway, but it really was a covered up stroke painting. The next painting that I'm going to show you is actually a relatively almost brand new kind of landscape painting. Is that in focus? Is it in focus? No. There's nothing I can do about it. It's PowerPoint. Wow. Sorry. This is called Vanishing Theater, done in 1974. And I guess I moved to the farm in Pennsylvania and started making paintings that were completely different than anything I had made. And it was the beginning of the women's movement, art movement, and but also this painting is about being caught up in a big drama with someone. It says on top, "Lament with words," "Vanishing Theater," "The Cut," and the third, part 3 is, "Take your clothes off, lady, and let's see who you really are." The Empress has no clothes. But it was really an intense painting for me. And the Vanishing Theater title came from a Middlemarch, actually, that I was reading at the time. I think it took me 3 years to read it. But in it, George Eliot says somewhere, when someone in her life went away, she said, the theater of all my ideas has vanished. and that's where I got the title. You can't see so much detail in my paintings when I show them like this, but it has fake fur in it. It has this very it has an open cut in the middle. It's a double canvas, so I opened it up, and it's got a chicken wire and cheesecloth, and then it's all sewn up. It's quite a big wound. Symphony 3. And it's not easy to see the left side, but it's very dark and brooding. And I think when I did this painting, I was thinking of Wagner, Mozart, and Beethoven. And that's sort of what the three parts of the painting, what I had in mind when I made it. This is called Heart On. And this also has kind of sewing, and it has a Valentine's candy box and mattress batting and more sewing and lentil seeds and this and that and the other thing. This was also done in 1974. Mom's just out, what is this called? Mom's just out there trying to break that grid. This is a painting that has disappeared, so if anyone ever sees it, let me know. It was bought by Cy Newhouse years ago, and then he sold it, but he would never tell me who he sold it to or where it went. Impossible. This is a new painting called Spring Eternal. And you can see I'm back to the grid and just the primed linen. Okay, back to 1975 or 6. And during this period, I did a painting called Resurrection, which is a 27-foot-long painting, which was about violence and murder and rape, and it's a painting that I'm not showing you, but this painting was done at the same time, and it sort of addresses those same issues with a newspaper article about two girls. I can't really read what happened, but from here, but something horrible, I'm sure. This is called Rooms, which is sort of a funny painting, using all kinds of materials and wallpaper and flooring and Symphony 4. Which, when I was making it, the left side is sort of the humorous side, or I don't know what side, the folk side, the Bartokian side. You know, it has plastic candle. Oh, my pointer's coming in very handy tonight. Plastic candle, the same flooring material. And then on the right side, it gets very dramatic with silk and velvet and kind of a serious grid situation. So just juxtaposing those two things. This is a new painting called Song Cycle 3. about 4 feet square. And it's got a sunflower in the middle. It's covered up with silk and velvet, and then the actual dried sunflower is sitting on the silk. That's another early painting called Rain Dance, incorporating children's drawings. When I was teaching kids in Bed-Stuy, I would collect some of their works on paper and put it in my paintings. Small elegy. Small elegy was actually done after I had a miscarriage, and well, you don't see it. It's sort of a totem, but totems started appearing in my paintings. This was like a tree. And those are all symbols that are in our collective unconscious, really. And for me, they just popped up after I had a miscarriage. These rags were actually rags from an etching project that I actually was making an etching of the Resurrection painting, but I made a series of etchings about it. And I was convinced that I had the miscarriage because I was working in a studio that was completely there was no exhaust whatsoever in the studio. And so that's one of the reasons why I put these rags from that project into this painting. Norfolk landscape also with the totems, and done right after the loss of the baby. It was a late miscarriage, so it was kind of pretty tough. Sweet Cathy's song. Once again, using children's drawings and the totems all across the top. This is a little totem painting. This one is called, I forgot the year, maybe 76 or 78. This one's called Mom's Just Out There Getting Crucified. I mean, I don't know why I was using the word mom. It was before I was a mom myself, but I guess I has his heart and the totem. It's not true, actually, because I remember this was in a Whitney Biennial, and I had Molly with me at that Whitney Biennial, and she saw a Julian Schnabel painting across from mine that had all broken dishes in it. And I remember her saying, "Mommy, that's dangerous. That painting is dangerous." Little did she know. This is called Song Cycle 1 for Molly. That's a new painting, which I showed with this one because I thought that was an interesting combination. Are these paintings are all out of focus or they're not? No. Okay. Symphony 5, or, yeah, 5. Well, this is one that my assistant insisted that I put in. It's called Tell Me in Any Way You Can. And it's another crazy painting with this crazy figure leaping through it, looking like she's sort of doing yoga, but not really. Some houses. But I like that, tell me in any way you can. It sort of became my mantra in certain ways. Morning, oh morning. Oh, and this painting was just about a lot of loss that I was feeling at the time. Loss of the marriage, an abortion, a miscarriage, loss of the farm, a house in the country. It was really, really depressed. I was depressed every day that I went out and worked on this painting. And I'm usually not at all depressed in my studio. It's the one place where I can get be not depressed. Savage Dreams. Or it's a little figure here. It's me and Molly, and these are taken from African masks, an African sculpture that I bought actually, that I used in many drawings and a few paintings. Beanfield with Music. Molly and I moved out to a farm in Eastport, New York, and I really wanted a new beginning, and I wanted not to be doing the heavy, intense, emotional paintings that I was doing. So, once again, I thought about the stroke paintings, but I didn't want to make stroke paintings, and I was living surrounded by bean fields, actually, in this little house in Eastport, New York. And I started making paintings of bean fields. I made bean fields in the snow, bean fields in the mud. Here's a bean field with a figure. This is called Baddeck Myth mit Blumen. Bedeck me with flowers, I'm dying of love. And I found all these cloth flowers on Mulberry Street. And I went home and stopped doing what I was doing and made this painting. And a friend of mine came over and posed, actually. That was fun. I think this is called To Transcend the Moon. And this kind of configuration on this side of the painting was always my idea of transcendence. I mean, it's what I thought of as transcendence when I would make that. The Altar, the Orchard, apple orchard with a snowstorm. And all those white pieces are little pieces of white linen. That's a figure in the middle caught up in a lot of painting going on. And I think there's grapes on top, I see. I'll have to show you the grapes. Up there. Cherry tree. This was painted, it became a symbol of life and death for me because it was painted during the time when my father was dying, and I actually had gone to visit him on Fort Hamilton Parkway at a nursing home where he was living, and there was this little cherry tree in a front yard in Fort Hamilton Parkway, which is not the most attractive street. Or boulevard or avenue, but this little cherry tree had all these rotting cherries on the bottom of it and cherries falling off of it and cherries on it, and I stopped and rang the bell and asked the woman if I could photograph her cherry tree, and so it became something that I've used for years, this idea. It's a piece of silk down the center. This is another landscape with a ledge on the bottom catching all the paint as it drops down. This is called Cherry Fall, which is a takeoff on the cherry tree, but without the tree. This one's called Carmina, and I think I was listening to Carmina Burana at the time, which is why I called it Carmina. This is another one that Mira, my assistant, insisted I put in. And I asked her why, and she said, well, you know, when people start comparing you to Joan Mitchell, I think they should see this painting. I don't know. I mean, anyway, it's just a painting I haven't looked at in years. Called My Life. I suppose a little retrospective type thing. This one is called And Acquainted with Grief. Listing all the different materials and symbols and feelings and things that have gone into a painting. This is called Oratorio, and I suppose it was me giving myself a retrospective, combining lots of different kinds of painting or images that or periods that I went through, whatever you want to call it, and putting them all into one painting. And of course, the major challenge in this painting and the most fun was getting them to sort of, each one of these motifs to interact with the other one. This is a bed of nails, actually. These are grapes, the ocean, Transcendence, a screaming face, the moon, the red squares, a heart, pumpkin fields, sunflowers, houses, cherries. This painting is called Cottage for Lily, and it's actually a painting that I did for someone that I knew quite well who died and who had made so many enemies in her life. I was fairly convinced that no one had said cottage for her. So I made a painting called Cottage for Lily. This is sort of the fun side of Oratorio, where I did another Oratorio type painting, but this one's called Body and Soul. And always searching for beauty. That's what this is called. Very hot. Symphony 6. Once again, incorporating the rags that I use when making etchings. That's what these things are. This is a newer painting called Brooklyn 2010. Having returned to Brooklyn from Woodstock, this is what I made in 2010. There's 3 more left. This is a painting called Tell My Sister, which is, I got very caught up with Martha Wainwright. I don't know if any of you know Rufus Wainwright's music or Martha Wainwright's music, and their mother, Kate McGarrigle. Anyway, Kate McGarrigle wrote a song called Tell My Sister, and I guess I heard Martha sing it, and I made this painting. And then Martha actually used it on the inside of her new CD, because we ended up meeting. So it's Tell My Sister to tell my mother that I'm coming home alone. And it was Kate McGarrigle's song about having left Loudon Wainwright and coming home. I guess Martha told me this part, coming home after having had a miscarriage from London. So she was coming home alone. Anyway, I love this song, and I made this painting, and then, lo and behold, I made another painting that Kate McGarrigle wrote that Martha sings called Proserpina. And all these words that are in this painting are in the song: heat, earth, stone, fields. And it's about Proserpina being kidnapped and taken to the underworld. And it's a gorgeous song. It was the last song that Kate McGarrigle wrote before she died, and she actually performed it. And now Martha sings it quite a bit. That painting is called Still, and that was done a couple of years ago. And I guess the word still could be seen 2 ways, like still here, still painting, still whatever, and also still, meaning quiet. And that's it. It's the lecture.